Dear Kazuki Takahashi, I am writing this script directly to you, as your works have been a major part of my life, namely Yu-Gi-Oh! And although you have left the series way back in the day because you could go on life support with this card game for the rest of your life, I could at least tell there was some inkling of your inspiration from your works into the future series. And I can't begin to tell you all the fond memories I had playing the card game that spun up from that one chapter. All the friends I made, all the memories I had, and I will always treasure them. That being said, the latest incarnation of the series you created is one of the worst things I have ever laid my eyes on, and to anyone who's reading this, I'm going to explain why! I was originally going to make a video talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
That's why, Poopy Head! My mommy says I'm really strong!
But considering how I need to tear into something and be a bit negative, I think it's important to talk about this series, especially since it's been out for a few months. And what better way to start off with how I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Funnily enough, it was through a VHS tape that came in the mail when I was a kid. I used to be kind of a little bit of a thing back in the Pokemon card game scene, and one day a tape just came in the mail. It's how I got my Banjo-Kazooie t-shirt. Yay! When I saw the second episode of Pegasus sent Yugi a tape and stole his grandfather's soul, I was, however, a little bit on edge.
Yugi!
Grandfather's soul.
Grandpa! Grandpa!
That could have happened to me!
Ever since then, though, I was a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! I wasn't the greatest duelist, but I won a few tournaments here and there, and managed to make a lot of friends with these tiny pieces of cardboard. Fun times for all. And I've been watching the anime ever since its inception, and in all of its incarnations. Duel Monsters, GX, 5Ds, Zexal, Arc 5, Vrains. At the very least, I could find something that could keep me getting through the stories and shows. But then Sevens came out.
This is worthless.
It's less than worthless, my boy.
And having watched the first 9 episodes of this train wreck of a series, I'm going to explain why it sucks and why this makes me dislike the precedent that this series is going to be setting forward.
Brooklyn Rage!
If there's one thing you can say about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that it has a very distinct art style in the anime. What with the sharp edges on the characters' hair, the clothes, it's almost hard to describe, but this art style was iconic for the series and obviously has been like this for almost 20 years at this point. But then you take a look at the art style for the latest incarnation of the series.
What the hell is that?
It's very different? There's a lot of simplicity here. There's barely anything that makes it stand out from the standard generic anime that you can see on any channel that you turn on. Even the eyes aren't the same from the original series. Here, let me show you in a comparison. You can see quite the clear difference. The hair, the shading, the eyes, the clothes, the lighting. There's considerably a lot more detail put into the fan interpretation that resembles more of the original Takahashi art style. Honestly, I could forgive a lot about the show's misgivings and how a simple plot has become the art style if at least was in line with the rest of the series. This, however, is due to the fact that Konami had switched animation studios from Studio Gallop to Studio Bridges. Now, to be fair here, it has been pointed out that there have been issues going on with Studio Gallop.
Meiko Abe, we've talked about her a bit on this channel, was an animator for Arc 5, and at the end of this series, she had some very interesting tweets that have been analyzed by a lot of us, including myself, quite often. She tweeted out publicly that the animators were not getting storyboards on time, and they were often unfinished, and they were basically just told, yeah, draw whatever, and then the higher-ups would bring her correct sheets as to how they wanted the animation to be done and the characters to be designed.
And this wasn't the first time this was a different art style for the series in animated form. Season 0 from Toei Animation, but at least in that, it still held a lot closely towards the Takahashi original art style. Despite its misgivings. But even then, you could easily tell its more unique animation style and art direction. Sevens? There's nothing really that makes it stand out from other anime apart from, cards. And sometimes an art style is something that can make your product stand out and draw attention towards it. Brains? Yes, it's a very flawed part of the Yu-Gi-Oh series, one that I will happily admit. Which is ironic coming from me because I originally said I liked the series, but that was years ago, and that video did not age well. But if there's one thing I can say, and I can only speak for myself in this regard, is that at least the art direction was in the same vein as the other series. Now, I'm not sure why the change was made. I'm not in Japan. I can't walk up to the Konami and go, "Hey, what's the deal?" and then get kicked out on the curb. And I know this is probably one of the pettiest things to go about with concerning the series, but the simplified art style really ties into my next point.
We've got to have money.
There's been a bit of a big misconception about Yu-Gi-Oh! And that it's been made for kids. If anything, the story in the original was made for preteens, especially in concerns with the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. Takahashi's original manga had explicit demonic and occult themes in the original manga, and even had deaths. This actually had a bit of an offset with how the manga could be adorable at times. I mean, in the first chapter we got Yugioh and Ushio trying to stab each other's hands through money. Yeah, that's made for kids. The concept that Yu-Gi-Oh's target audience was kids is something that came from on the Western side of things, all thanks to the idea was to market the anime to a younger demographic because it's a cartoon filled with death and, Look, let's not beat around the bush. We all know about how censorship in anime has left us with some interesting imagery in the past. 4Kids had to censor a lot from the original story because they wanted to appeal to a younger demographic, and in doing so, the age range dropped to a much younger audience. Konami, following suit, had to censor the artwork of the card game when it came to distribution in the West. I mean, they kind of sucked because I remember picking up a pack of Metal Raiders when I was really young, opening up and seeing the original art for Harpy Lady. Ooh.
No, unacceptable.
Damn it, YouTube, you're just as bad as 4Kids. Now, if my story at the beginning didn't spell it out for you, this actually worked. A younger demographic has achieved for the franchise, but it came with a price. And that was because it showed that Konami was frickin' stupid. Konami decided in all their big brainness, they then allowed their short-sighted decisions to overlay drastic power creep into the game. And this alienated the younger demographic that they sought out. Don't get me wrong, I don't think kids are stupid. Most of the time. But when you get complex strategies like Necros, which require you to be able to act quick, do several searches, and get the appropriate cards, especially in a small amount of time, you got yourself a bit of an issue. Now watch as I get a ton of comments telling me that people who were 8 years old and were pulling off the Knockouts combos like they were nothing. Regardless, teens and adults are able to adapt to these complex strategies a lot easier. And that's not even addressing the problem of, that little thing called card cost. I mean, some of these cards could go for like hundreds of dollars at times. How's a kid supposed to afford that? And don't even get me started on how card packs were basically like gambling at the time. Ugh. Unfortunately, getting back to my original point, while this was going on, Konami continued to push this kid-friendly message. You can see this in the card art censorship, and in case you hadn't noticed, with the exception of Reigns, ever since 5Ds there's been a younger and younger protagonist, with Yuga from 7s being 11 years old. I honestly like the idea of Reigns going back to a slightly older protagonist, because, hey, why not? At least it's better than what we've been getting. But with Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, we had a much more simplified version of the game. A game, mind you, that's been hinted at that the Westerners aren't going to be getting a version of this game. Or apparently we are, from what I've been looking into. It's kind of confusing in my regard. Who knows? But this was a solution that Konami created for themselves. They kept introducing new mechanics, new rules, changing the layout of the game, even putting restrictions on previous mechanics that in order to have you had to use link monsters to use. They essentially made the extra deck into a paid-for-use word. Basically, in order to access your extra deck monsters in any meaningful capacity, you basically had to run link monsters, meaning you had to buy them in some capacity. Oh, and then there's the power creep. You want to know why something like Duel Links became so popular? A game that has a simplified version of the original cards and didn't have a more complex mechanics or overly broken cards in it? initially. It's because it had what Yu-Gi-Oh! Originally had, and it's what made it great. It wasn't as complex as the newer game version is, and there wasn't as fast of a power creep initially. But now we've got a new spin-off game that essentially makes the game way too easy. Normal summon as many monsters as you want, draw until you have 5 cards in your hand. This was the bed that Konami made, and now they have to sleep in it. Which is kind of odd because they already made these duels already in Duel Links, which are actually pretty much done as speed duels. Which, by the way, if I can rant for a moment, I kind of find it to be BS that you can't use regular cards for that because, it's just stupid if you ask me. Not that my opinion matters in this. I'm not an 8 to 12-year-old.
Nothing bad ever happens to
Konami.
Look, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think Sevens is an offensively bad show, but I'm not gonna call it good either. And I've given the show about 9 episodes and enough time for me to stew on it. Like, at this point, there's not really much of a plot, which isn't a problem for a new series since it's trying to establish the character motivation as well as any antagonist, which the show does do, and I'll give it credit for that. The basic idea of the show is actually interesting too, that the original system of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Duel Monsters was flawed, with the entire show being framed around a bit of a dystopia with a company, Goha, pretty much enforcing the rules that master rules are a symbol of oppression. There's something interesting there for you to nibble on, but it's so buried under the self-aggrandizing of rush duels. It's pretty one note, and it's laid on so thick that you could drown in it. I mean, I brought up the art style issue from before, but I can also forgive a generic art style depending on the story, and if there's something there. How to promote content when under a state of heavy censorship with full control over the internet. It's a question that I myself have to deal with how oppressive YouTube can be at times. It's an amazing conflict idea, and I actually do want to watch Sevens more in the future to see if it actually goes somewhere with it. But the cast, even though I do find them to be energetic and to have good chemistry with each other, don't really do anything with it. The only thing they really do is just promote rush duels, and that's not really going to work with this sort of thing right here because you've got like 4 kids going up against an entire corporation, which can make for an interesting underdog story, but it's just, you know, they're not doing anything. I guess reminding the audience that this is a show that about a product that you can buy is important though. So I don't know why I got my hopes up. But what do I know? I'm just some schmuck on the net. I like Yugioh. I still collect the card games. I'm more of a collector nowadays. But I find this show to be quite a disappointment. And I can't help but wonder that I'll have to say goodbye to the series because of this. Maybe I'm being over dramatic, but who knows? But now I want to know what you schmucks think. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the latest Yu-Gi-Oh! And what you think what's going to happen in the future. I'm Uncle Common, thanks for watching, and remember to examine your fandom.
Yeah!